Welcome to MLS Six Pack Live here on the SCH Network. I'm Madison Cruz. Joined with me is the voice of Atlanta United in Jason Longshore. I always say that every time I introduce you. It just feels natural at this point. Every time you just say it, I don't know why. It
I
just
just
is.
I just smile and nod at this point.
Well, I mean, you're one of the two voices of Atlanta
Yes.
United. Exactly.
Yes. There are multiples.
Multiples. We have a few all over the place. But basically, for this MLS Six Pack, we're going to be going over everything that is to be about the MLS Cup Playoffs as we head into the semifinal games this weekend and four huge matches for a couple of teams. I think you got on the East, you wanted to get a little rivalry in both matches there. I don't even know how it just worked out that way, but it was what was intended to be because it's going to be chaos. And then on the West, a couple of sides, you got the two powerhouses in LAFC and LA Galaxy. They're going to be going up against a little bit of the underdogs, but going to be interesting to see how both of those things line.
Yeah, I think what's interesting is like out west, everybody's just expecting LAFC and the LA Galaxy to meet in the Western Conference Final. And I mean, according to the seeding, they should. But as we've seen in the East, seeding doesn't really mean a whole lot these days. So, can Seattle or Minnesota pull an upset? I hate to say that it's impossible, judging from Atlanta's run in the postseason. Anything is possible in this league. But
Anything is possible.
it is, but out west, I feel like it's set up more for chalk for the top two seeds to get through. The East, I mean, you couldn't write it any better. I know a lot of people freaked out when Inter Miami was eliminated. No, nobody's going to watch. Well, you have one of the biggest fan bases in the league in Atlanta United, whose fans are very energized right now. And quite a few of them are traveling to Central Florida for this game. So that's never a bad thing when you get a giant fan base all riled up. And you have that. And yes, you'd love to have Lionel Messi and his super friends in the biggest games of the year, but they didn't hold up their end of the bargain. So, what you do have in the East is a rivalry with the New York teams, which is a very good rivalry. Hudson River is a big deal. It's one that lately has been the way of the Pigeons. We'll talk about it a little bit as we go tonight. And then you have another rivalry, and I know people get really hung up on like using that word. It's okay to have multiple rivalries for a team, and it's okay to call things a rivalry for teams that haven't been around that long. Um, it might not be forever, and I kind of think Atlanta and Orlando maybe hasn't been as much of a rivalry as of late because Orlando has been preoccupied with Miami in terms of rivalry. Atlanta has been preoccupied with Charlotte and Nashville in terms of rivalry, but Atlanta and Orlando flat out don't like each other. They haven't from day one. And those feelings can easily be reignited. And I think they're going to be on Sunday. So you don't get Inter Miami, but you do get two games with a lot of potential to be combustible.
I think it's going to be such a fun Saturday and Sunday with everything. I love that they also have it spread out too. You
Mhm.
get the Hudson River Derby first thing on Saturday, then you get LAFC and Seattle, and then on Sunday you got Atlanta United and Orlando and LA Galaxy and Minnesota. So they split it up a little bit. They want to make sure that not everyone's heart rate is spiking all the way. They want to make sure everyone is at a decent level for a little bit. But before we get into both those matches, and we talk a little bit more about that later on, a lot of news has come out this week pertaining to MLS. I think one of the biggest headlines that we've seen this week has been Tata Martino leaving Inter Miami for personal reasons. I know when I saw that report from Tom Bogart 2 days ago, I was shocked because I thought he led the team to one of the best regular seasons any team has ever had in MLS. And now he's gone.
Yeah. Tata's not someone who usually stays at one place for very long. His time in Mexico, outside of national teams, his time in Mexico was longer than his time in Miami, but not by a lot. His time in Paraguay was longer. National teams are a little bit different animal, but club teams, it's pretty much 2 seasons. Um, that's what he's done throughout his career. Did it here in Atlanta with 2 years, two full seasons. Miami, it was a year and a half. You look at his time at Newell's Old Boys, it was, I think, about a year and a half, maybe 2 full years. Um, it's just not his MO. So it's weird in that it was a surprise because you hadn't heard anything about it. And we'll find out more tomorrow. They have a press conference scheduled in Miami where they'll talk about the why, and Tata will be there. But when you think about what his career has been, it's really not a surprise. I think what'll be interesting is how his time in Miami ultimately is remembered. I don't think it'll be remembered like his time here in Atlanta has been. I just don't see it that way because ultimately, even though they did win a supporter shield, which is a very good accomplishment, no question about it, best record in terms of MLS regular season ever, and that will at least be held for a while. That record seems to be getting passed like year after year here lately. Um, Won a Leagues Cup last year, and it was an amazing tournament, and it was Messi's debut in the league, and it was great. They didn't win MLS Cup, and that's what success is measured by in this league. It just is. You can like it, you can not like it. Jordi Alba's breaking things if he's listening to this right now, but that's just that's how it is. So he didn't do that. And Miami was not built to have a good season, even a record breaking regular season in a league where you have to win the cup at the end. They were built to win all the trophies, and they're going to win one this year. And I know it upsets people, but it's how I feel with how the schedule is currently constructed. They won the least important of the trophies, the supporter shield, because you don't play a balanced schedule anymore. You don't play every team in the West. So teams have a wide variety of degree of difficulty when it comes to schedules. It's the trophy that I don't think you put as much stock into. Now, they made it count with the way that they won it. I give them a ton of credit. But that and a Leagues Cup, that's what they have to show for this. So it starts to really turn quickly after they were bounced by Atlanta in the postseason. Has everything been a success for Inter Miami? It has financially. It has in terms of PR. It has in terms of Q rating, all that kind of stuff. But has it really been a success on the field enough? Whoever comes in is going to have a lot of pressure on them to make sure that there isn't a question about that.
I think it's interesting too. You bring up the fact about the supporter shield. I mean, when Atlanta won it, 2018, they didn't win the supporter shield, and then they went on to win the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think the supporter shield it almost mimics, especially obviously what we see in Premier League. You know, top seed at the top, whatever. It's a big thing, especially for points at the end. Who's at the top? It's just one of those to give that credit where credit is due for the
It's not
regular
the same
season.
though. That's
It's
the
not the
thing.
same, no.
Because you don't play the same kind of format. Like,
No.
and that's the thing I think you have to keep in mind whenever you talk about, well, the Premier League does this, or La Liga does this, or the Bundesliga does this. They play everybody home and away. It's a smaller league. It's a different country, different sporting culture, all those things. So yeah, the regular season does tell you because everybody plays the same schedule. The regular season tells you who the best team should be. Okay. This league, you can't do that. If you did that, you would play a regular season starting next year where you play 29 teams home and away. So you're playing 58 games in a regular season. No, it's not going to happen that way. So you have to have a playoff at the end to determine who the best team is. And it does change the way your flow goes. And now that the schedules are even more unbalanced than they used to be. Go back to 2018, like you played everybody in the season, but the Red Bulls win Supporter Shield. I'd have to go back and look at it. They might have played some of the tougher teams from the West at home, where Atlanta might have had to go to those teams in the West. So it's the same, but it's not the same. Now you're not even playing everybody. You're not even playing the same schedule. So the Supporter Shield means less. And it's not meaningless. It's not that it, doesn't mean you're a good team. It does. I think obviously if you have a good regular season, you're a good team. It matters for seeding. And I think people trying to start arguments because Miami got knocked out in the playoffs saying the regular season doesn't matter. They got 2 of the 3 games at home in the best of 3. They should win 2 games at home and move on. They didn't. Like, that's why you do it. So, like, unless you're going to either squeeze the league, make it smaller, or you're going to play a 58 game regular season, then like you have to have playoffs, and it is what it is. And Miami ultimately in a league that's based on that, they haven't been successful enough.
And I mean, it brings up the point, no one remembers really that the Red Bulls won the Supporter Shield in 2018.
No.
Everyone knows that Atlanta United won the Cup in 2018. So
Yeah.
it shows how, and again, it's not meaningless. Winning the Supporter Shield, getting to that top in the regular season, that's a testament. That's something that needs to be praised and applauded. But then as soon as that's done, you got to move ahead to the playoffs, because you now get the seeding. You're now the top. You're now slated to be one of the teams to possibly win the MLS Cup. Now you got to go in and get the job done. And if you can't do that, then sorry.
You set yourself up with home field advantage. And it does matter. We've talked about how hard it is to win on the road in this league. It matters to have home field advantage. It matters to have the road go through your building. Well, you have to then win the games. And they didn't. So I think whoever gets the job now, and there's going to be a ton of rumors. Xavi's name has come up. Javier Mascherano's name has come up. Probably going to be somebody connected with Messi. You would assume that he's going to have a lot of say in who comes in. It's going to be fascinating, the dynamic with David Beckham and with Jorge Mas and with Lionel Messi, and who ends up getting that job. I think they have more pressure now than Tata did when he walked in for Leagues Cup at the end, or the end of the first half of the regular season last year. There was pressure because you make all these signings, you're expected to win, and they did win something immediately. Maybe that took away a little bit of the pressure. Well, now whoever comes in next, there's huge pressure to win MLS Cup next year. And look, they might or they might not. They kind of went reverse from how a lot of people thought, and we'll jump into a couple other things here in a second. Like, I thought coming into the season they would be a so-so team in the regular season and they'd turn it on in the playoffs. And they didn't. They actually were much more consistent than I thought they were capable of, even with Messi missing a ton of games, but they didn't turn it on in the playoffs. They really weren't good enough in the postseason. So, we'll see. But whoever comes in, I think it's as pressure packed of a job as we've ever seen in MLS, with a manager who will be expected to win day one.
I'm looking forward to hearing what is going to be said tomorrow in that press conference, especially because Tata did have another year on his contract, could have stayed another year. Interesting to see what he has to say and what is going to be said tomorrow in that press conference for Inter Miami. But as we move things along, a little bit of a positive, something that I know, at least for me, when I saw it, I was very, very happy to see. Wilfried Nancy was named 2024 MLS Coach of the Year. I'm not shocked. I think he deserved it. I think ultimately the way he led Columbus Crew this season is outstanding. And we're not the only ones who thought that. If you're looking at the voting results, looking at the players, it was 43.03% for Nancy, and it was 24.85 for Tata. Now it was almost tied with the media, 38% for Nancy, and it was 36 for Tata. And then clubs, it was tied, 38.24%. Completely tied all the way around. But I think Nancy deserved it, and I'm very, very happy that he got the award.
Yeah, I'm a little surprised that the club vote was as close. I thought the media vote, yeah, kind of expected that. I thought maybe even Tata would be ahead of it, just because that seemed to be what people were talking about. Um, Wilfried Nancy's the best manager in the league right now. Yeah, it's coach of the year is not the coach of the team that had the best record necessarily. You look at the rosters on paper, and Miami, you would expect would have a better record than Columbus, and they did. But I think what Columbus has done over the last year and a half, even though they were bounced in the postseason this year, they did win it last year, and they made deep runs in other competitions. I think this Columbus run has been as impressive as we've seen, and losing in the first round of the playoffs to me doesn't change that. I think that's down to Wilfried Nancy being as good as he is.
I would agree with you. I mean, I said it on Scarves and Spikes. And, you can talk about what happened at Inter Miami. We can talk about Tato's reign there and what happened. But to me, you're looking at the overall performance. And I think you mentioned a spread across multiple competitions with what was done. to me, it's a no-brainer. To me, it's a no-brainer. I saw online a lot of people were shocked. A lot of people thought it was going to be Tata, especially with what happened. To me, I wasn't shocked. If anything, I saw it and I was very, very happy because I think he deserves it. I think out of
Yeah.
all of it, and that's not to say that Tata wasn't a phenomenal manager
No.
this season. No, not at all. But to me, if you're going for that award, I think it has to go for someone who led this team and did it in ways that I think has been building for so long and it's finally coming into its own. And we're even looking at last season too when they won the MLS Cup. I mean, I think he absolutely deserves this award, and I will fight anyone who says that he doesn't.
To me, don't be going around fighting people now. Slow down. To me, like Coach of the Year and MVP are two awards that are hard to define, and you kind of know it when you see it. And in this year, and it each year kind of has a different flow to it. This year for me, Nancy was undeniable. In a lot of years, if you take Nancy out of the equation, Chris Armas finished third, and I thought Chris Armas did an amazing job with Colorado, rebuilding them from where they were. I think there's been others. I think Phil Neville did some really good things with Portland. I think Ben Olsen did some really good things with Houston. I think there were a lot of good managerial performances this year, but in this year with what he did and the quality of the performances, I think Wilfred Nancy was the deserving Coach of the Year.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm very happy for him. Very happy. More of the end of year awards are going to start rolling out, especially as we get closer to the end of the MLS Cup. So keep an eye out. It's going to be a lot of fun seeing how the rest of them play out, especially with MVP as well. That one is going to be a fun one to keep an eye out. But the
Yep.
last bit of news that we have before we wrap up segment one and we will head out for a quick break. FC Cincinnati broke the signing record, especially that was set by Atlanta United when we got Thiago Almada back in 2023. They have acquired Kevin Denke from Belgium. He will be joining their side. That was rumored to be around, not rumored, that is reported from a club record of 16.2 million in a transfer fee. So that's going to be a fun signing. A really,
It,
really fun one to watch.
it could be. He had a great season last year in Belgium, 27 goals. He won the Golden Boot race. The last Golden Boot winner in Belgium also came to MLS, and it's Hugo Kuipers. He scored 20 goals in 2022, 2023. Hugo Kuipers has not been, I think, what you would expect for that amount of money that he was purchased for. I think Kevin Dinky has higher upside. But the question is, does the Belgian league translate to MLS? We're going to find out. Lots of great things you can point to and say that he'll be successful. He's done great. I think it's a lot of money. I think that puts a lot of expectation on him, and I don't. I think when you look at and look, Thiago Almada, I think paid off, not in terms of the transfer fee that Atlanta got for him on the back end, but Thiago Almada had done a lot in youth national teams and in the Argentine league, and we know the Argentine league generally translates pretty well to Major League Soccer. So that amount of money that was spent on him, I think there was maybe an easier expectation that he would produce at the level you expect. I don't necessarily have that in this move. I'll be really curious to see how he adapts. He has scored 9 goals in 38 games for Togo at the international level. He scored a lot of goals in his club career, over 200 games, 78 goals, 27 goals last year, 34 goals over the past 2 seasons, which jumps out to you a little bit, like 27 one year, 7 the first year in Belgium. Okay. Is it a career year, or is he coming into his own? I don't think it's a slam dunk that Cincinnati gets their money's worth on this move. I'll be really interested to see if they do.
He signed as a designated player contract through 2028 and an option for 2029. So he'll be there for a little bit. I'm interested to see how it plays out as well, especially when I saw, the dollar signs in front of that one. I was like, "Oh, okay." I was like, "All right," But since he's buying in, it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out in 2025 for them.
I'm impressed that they're spending the money. I don't know if they're going to get a sure return on their investment. We're going to find out.
We'll find out. Well, we'll be right back here on the MLS Six Pack here on the SDH Network. Next segment, we're going to be talking all about the next upcoming semifinal matches in the MLS Cup Playoffs. So stick around, guys. We'll be back in a few. Welcome back to the MLS Six Pack Live here on the SDH Network. I'm Madison Cruz. He's Jason Longshore. And we're going to get into it. Let's get into what everyone I think has been dying to talk about, which is got to be the semifinal matches that are be playing on Saturday and on Sunday. We'll go ahead and start with the earliest game on Saturday at 5:30 p.m. It's going to be NYC versus Red Bulls, the Hudson River Derby. It's happening.
Number 6 versus number 7 in the
Ooh.
East. Didn't have 6 and 7 both getting here. Red Bulls beat Columbus in 2 games. Didn't need the third. Second one did need penalties. NYC got past Cincinnati. They did need penalties in game number 3 as well, and that was a crazy shootout. This is a weird one because one, it's going to be at Citi Field. It's not going to be at Yankee Stadium, so it's at NYC's, I guess, secondary home. I don't know. Maybe that changes over these next couple of years until they get into Etihad Field, which now has a name. Red Bulls have been 2 different teams this season, and it's so interesting. I think we talked about them really, really early in the season, and they scared me as how good they were and how good they could be. Emil Forsberg is one of the best signings of the season. Problem is, he missed most of the year, and the Red Bulls were not the same team without him. NYC beat them both games this year. Forsberg missed both games this year. And you look at how Red Bull started and then how they played against Columbus versus the rest, which is the majority of the season, it feels like 2 completely different teams. And I think with Emil Forsberg, they're the better team in this game. They have to go on the road. They have to deal with Citi Field, but I think the Red Bulls are the better of the 2 teams, and I think they're going to find a way to get through.
Looking at the head-to-head, Red Bulls has the number with 15 wins. NYC has 10 wins and 4 draws. 4 draws between them. I mean, we always know that this rivalry is heated. I've seen so many games where, I mean, I sit there and think they're about to have like a brawl in like the first 2 minutes. I mean, truly. It's one of those, I think it just stems so far, and to have it here in the MLS semifinal, With a lot at stake, I think it's going to get very interesting. And even looking at it too, I would agree with you. I think you look at both of these sides, and you look at the 6 and the 7 first of all, and you're like, how did that happen? The top 3 teams are out in the East. Completely out. Goodbye. Inter Miami, goodbye. Columbus Crew, done. Cincinnati, out. I was honestly more shocked with Red Bulls coming away with it in just 2 games against Columbus, especially at New York, winning it in penalties.
Yeah, I wasn't shocked in the sense that I think Red Bulls were a good team. I didn't think they were going to get past Columbus. I thought they would make Columbus work for it, but I thought Columbus would end up finding their way through. Columbus didn't play well in 2 games, well enough. I don't think they played badly. I think Red Bulls were very good. NYC beating Cincinnati wasn't as much of a shock to me, just because I think Cincinnati isn't the team that they thought they were going to be this year either. Losing Matt Miazga in the middle of the year, having other injuries, not really getting anything out of number 9. That's why they go spend $16.2 million to get a new number 9. I think Cincinnati was beatable. I didn't think Columbus was, but I think that speaks to how good this Red Bulls team is and can be. And we saw them twice late in terms of Atlanta United facing them. And the game up there was chaotic. They got a late goal to get a point out of it. They weren't great in the game at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Atlanta was the better team and took care of business. I think this is a Red Bull team that next year will be a contender in the East. I think they have, assuming they keep everything together and the majority of this group comes back and they add a little bit to it. I think they have that kind of quality, and I think they're the kind of team that can really cause you problems in a one-off. Being that pressing team, being that disruptive team, I think they can be a real challenge in a one-off where they just make your life miserable for 90 plus minutes. I think they're going to do that on Saturday. I honestly think the Red Bulls are going to get through this and win in regulation.
Ooh, I could see that too. I could see that. I also could just see it being just a so back and forth game, and then it end up being like 3-3 by the end of it, and then we go to PKs or something. I just think that match in particular, I think, is going to be so crazy. And I think not even for the fact that you have 2 teams coming in, 2 teams that, again, I think it's a story for the East. No one really thought would be in this position, especially beating Columbus and Cincinnati. But with the emotion of just this rivalry in
Yeah,
general, I
that's a
think
huge
that is
factor.
going to be huge in this game.
Yeah, it's a huge
Absolutely.
factor. Whoever handles the emotions of it
Ooh,
is going to have a
yeah.
huge advantage because it could get messy. We'll see. I think Red Bulls are more suited to being the aggressor. I think they can take NYC out of their comfort zone, and I think Red Bulls find a way to win.
All right, let's move to the West. Let's move to the later game where us over here at the East Coast will have to, maybe have a coffee, maybe, take 3 deep breaths after you watch the Hudson River Derby to then watch number 1 LAFC versus number 4 Seattle Sounders. And this one is interesting to me because you look at it on paper and you think, oh, LAFC is going to come away with it completely. I mean, they're slated to be the ones who will make it to the final of the Western Conference final, maybe even to the MLS Cup. But for me, I don't know. I mean, I looked at the way they played against Vancouver, and to me, I don't know. If you're gonna go up and you're gonna step into this game, you gotta come out looking like you want it. And to me, it looked like it was kind of lackluster.
Yeah, LAFC is weird, and I really don't like what Steve Cherundolo has done with that team. You think back to Bob Bradley and the knock on Bradley's LAFC teams were that they weren't strong enough defensively. Cherundolo, it's like completely overreacted to that and has made them very good defensively. In terms of not risking anything. Like I think when you look at the season, you look at the quality of this team, they're so good in transition, and they pretty much only play for transition moments now. They at 47% possession. Uh, that was completely different back in the day. I I think they're so reliant on what the other team does to then try to exploit the space in behind that I wonder how this game's going to go because Brian Schmetzer's been around the block a few times. this is a Seattle team that doesn't necessarily need a ton of the ball. This is a Seattle team that's really good defensively. Does this turn into a staring contest? Does it turn into one of those games where Seattle doesn't really want the ball? They want to make LAFC have to play and dictate the play and not be able to be in transition. You bet on your defense, you bet on LAFC not being able to break you down and not having that space to attack on, and then maybe getting out in transition moments of your own. Look, it's a risky bet against a team that's as good attack wise as LAFC, but I think it's one that the Sounders could ride to success. I don't think they do. I think LAFC does get it done here, but I'm with you. They haven't been that impressive in the postseason, and I think they're not going to have an easy time of it here. I don't think it's going to be the most wonderful game because I think Seattle will do what they have to do to stay in it. But I think LAFC will find enough of a transition moment to end up getting the win. It might be a 1-0 game.
Seattle's forced it in both the games in game 1 and game 2 against Houston.
Barely, though.
Barely. It went to penalties. The first one was
Mhm.
scoreless. It was 5-4 in penalties for Seattle. That also was due to Houston getting a red card in that match, I believe. Actually, in the next one,
Red
another
cards
red
in
card
each
was
game
given.
for two of their top players, Coco Carrasquilla and Hector Herrera. It wasn't easy for Seattle. They got through. They were expected to. It was a 4-5, so you would expect that to be really close. I think Seattle's a good team. I don't think they're a great team. I think they're going to need the defense to deliver a performance that is better than maybe they have generally, and they're going to have to find a goal from a fortunate, attack or catch LAFC in transition or what have you. I just don't think they will. I think LAFC will break them down one too many times. And I just don't think there's going to be many times for either team in this game. I don't think it's going to be pretty. I think it's going to be cagey, and LAFC will just find a way on one break with probably Boanga at the heart of it. He's just such a dangerous player in those big transition moments. I do really wonder what they're going to do lineup wise. I don't think they're as good with Olivier Giroud starting, and that's not an easy name to leave off the team sheet. But I think they're better in the shape that worked better for them most of the season, and we'll see what they end up doing. I think they'll find a way. I think it'll be a 1-0. I really don't think it'll be an entertaining match for the neutral.
It's interesting too. You look at the head-to-head, I think, for LA and Seattle. It's very interesting. Before we move on to the next match, we're going to flip that one around too on Sunday. But looking at LAFC and Seattle in the regular season, it was LAFC both times. Able to come away with it, came away with the win, a 2-1 victory back in February, and then a 3-0 victory back in July. But they did face each other in Leagues Cup final stage, as well as the Open Cup, where LAFC also took home the win in both of those as
Yep.
well.
They're the
I
better team.
they're the better team,
I
absolutely.
don't think it's by a huge margin, but they're the better team, and I think that's kind of how this will play out. I think my issue with Cherundolo and LAFC and what they've turned into is, you said it about their series with Vancouver. For as good as they are being a top team in the West in the regular season, I don't think they are a dominant team. And I think they allow teams to play with them far too much for the quality that they have. And I think that's down to wanting to exploit transition moments, which is a logical thing with the way that team's built, but also being, I don't want to say afraid, like it's not the right way to put it, because I do think they're trying to exploit the transitions, but I think they don't dominate games. They don't stand up and say, we're going to beat you. It's a little bit more of, we're going to wait for you to make a mistake. And I think that can come back to hurt you if teams don't make that mistake. And they're really good at causing it. They're really good at forcing it. They're really good at exploiting it. But I don't know if they get to MLS Cup riding that method this season.
All right, let's go to the other LA team. LA Galaxy, number 2 in the West, goes up against number 6 in Minnesota. That game is going to be Sunday, November 24th at 6 p.m. at LA Galaxy. I mean, another dominating performance from the LA Galaxy over Colorado. Game 1, game 2, knocked them, I believe, had 9 goals in game 1 and game 2 combined. I mean, it's one of those things where you look at LA Galaxy, pen and paper, LA Galaxy's going to take home the win in this one.
Yeah, I think they're the better team by a wide margin. And talking about good teams being dominant, the Galaxy have done that. This attack is just absolutely devastating to opponents. One of the best attacks we've seen in MLS maybe ever. I mean, it's that good. Minnesota, look, great for them to get past RSL. They got through on penalties both times. Dane St. Clair can be one of those goalkeepers that stands on his head. I think the Galaxy will take control of this game early, and I think they will take control of it and get ready to face their crosstown rivals in the Western Conference Final. That will be epic.
Oh, if we get that in the Western Conference Final,
We should.
we should.
I think we
Absolutely,
do.
we should. We totally should. And gosh, just beautiful. Totally beautiful. I completely agree with you with that one. I think with the way Minnesota has been playing this season, how it's just kind of been like up and down, up and down. You never really know where they're going to kind of fall, especially I think with their run in the playoffs. I think LA Galaxy is going to come away with this one. Maybe 2, 3 goals. I think LA Galaxy is coming away with it, especially at home. Not
Yeah.
playing, I believe, I believe 22 days counting.
Yeah, which can be a problem. They could come out and be a little flat early on, but I don't think that's going to be the case with
No.
this team. I don't think Minnesota has quite enough to exploit it. Look, getting past RSL, that's a good accomplishment for Minnesota. I think that's going to be what they hang their hat on as they go into 25. But I don't think, unless the Galaxy play poorly, I don't think Minnesota can expect to go in and win this game.
All right. Buckle your seatbelts. Everyone get in. We're going to talk about the game that everybody wants us to talk about. And it's going to be number 4 Orlando going up against number 9 Atlanta United. It's so fun. I think this is the exact game that you want to see in the semifinals. And especially with the run that Atlanta United has been having this season, obviously beating Inter Miami. I mean, how can you not root for them? How can you not?
Orlando fans aren't.
Orlando fans aren't. Orlando fans aren't, but
There's probably others who won't be.
maybe.
Atlanta made a lot of people happy knocking Miami out, but it'll be interesting to see where the neutrals feel about this game.
It's going to be a fun one. You know, you got Orlando knocking off Charlotte, and then you have Atlanta United coming to this one knocking off Inter Miami. We're going to talk a lot more about this game over the next break, so stick around. We'll be right back as we get ready to talk about Orlando versus Atlanta. Welcome back to MLS Six Pack here on the SDH Network, live edition with Jason Longshore and myself, Madison Cruz. Let's go ahead and talk about it. Let's talk about Orlando City SC versus Atlanta United. I mean, if you're looking at Orlando, I think safe to say, arguably one of the best Orlando teams I've seen in a hot minute. And
Yep.
then you have Atlanta United coming in as the underdog as the ninth seed, taking down number one Inter Miami in game three, forced the game three, and defeated them in a swift fashion, in my personal opinion, from being there. Atlanta United dominated.
Game 3?
I believe so. I don't
Mm,
know. I go back and forth on it, but I
I
mean
don't
at
know
the
if I'd
end of
say
the day,
dominated.
I think they outwitted or they outplayed, if that makes any sense. In the sense of what they were able to do, I feel like they just read Miami really well. And they were able to pick up on things. And I don't know if that's because of, which is so interesting to me actually. And I asked Rob, I asked a couple players about it at the time too, and it's still fascinating. You know, you get 3 games to play the same opponent.
Mhm.
How does that change? Like you get a bigger deep dive into a team and you get to really like know everything there is to know about this team. And that's what Atlanta did.
Yeah, it's game 3 is a fever dream of a game. Like
Cool.
I don't know how to describe it because you give up the first goal, then Atlanta scores twice to go up 2-1. Miami's throwing everything at you. They finally get the equalizer. Brad gets launched into the net. It's chaos. And then you go down the other way and you score. Um, I don't think either team dominated. I don't know if it just the game never felt like it had a whole lot of control in it either way. Miami had more opportunities, but maybe not the higher percentage of good ones. It was volume for them. I think the series, game one, Miami uh, dominated, I think, to a degree. Atlanta was very tired, but Atlanta fought really hard and stayed in it the whole way. Game two, Atlanta dominated by a wider margin than the scoreline. Game three was a slugfest, and you can point to metrics and say Miami was better and they had all these shots and Brad Kazan was amazing and he was, he's a huge part of it. You can point to metrics and you look at the quality of individual shots and you can say, well, Atlanta created maybe better chances. Um, Ultimately, I think Atlanta had a tactical plan that worked better than Miami had sheer talent. And that's what it came down to. And ultimately for Miami, I think you have to really look at the way this roster was constructed and ask why there wasn't another defensive midfielder in the group and why Yannick Bright was the most important player for Miami in the series. Because when he left game two, the series turned. Yannick Bright, who played at the University of New Hampshire, was the most important player for Miami in the series. And it's because of the way their roster was constructed. And I know, look, this will probably make people mad, but um, they signed Julian Gressel in the offseason. And I said it was a luxury signing at the time. He didn't play in the series. And I know he spoke in Dax McCarty's podcast and Dan Gargan and Alan Gordon and the crew, the Major League Journeyman. And he kind of wondered why he didn't play in the series. He wasn't good enough defensively, and that was the issue in Columbus as well. Well, when you needed to sign cover in the central midfield in case Sergio Busquets couldn't run, which you knew he couldn't run coming into the season, he's still great on the ball. You can still make all that work. You can have somebody run for him. Yannick Bright did. When you don't have that, you're asking somebody else to do that role, and they can't. It's not Federico Redondo's role. He's not a deeper lying midfielder. It's not Benjamin Kremaski's role. Maybe David Ruiz could have been that, and he was out too. So the series turned on Yannick Bright's injury. I think Atlanta was right there with Miami up to that point. But the series turned on a draft picks injury for the most expensive roster ever created in this league. And it tells you in this league, you got to have balance. You got to have contributions from all facets. Flip it over to the Atlanta side. You lose Brooks Lennon, one of your most regular players over the past couple of years. You lose him in game one. You've had to deal with injuries. Jay Fortune couldn't start game 3. Tristan William-Bach comes in and gives you a good performance for 60 minutes. Ronald Hernandez has come back from injury. He has given you good performances. Luis Abram has come in and given you good performances. You've used so many different guys in this series, and they don't have the top end talent that Miami does. And they want to. They want to have that again. They're going to go out and spend. They're going to go out and sign 2 designated players in the offseason. But you've got to have the balance within your squad. You're going to need, in a game like this, you're going to need that guy who might be, in terms of the transfer marked valuations, he might be the 25th most valuable player on your team. You're probably going to need them at some point in this phase of the season. And Miami didn't have somebody else who could play in the midfield and give them the balance that they needed, and Atlanta exploited it. They took advantage in game 3. We talked about it all going into game 3. No Yannick Bright means Miami can't defend that portion of the field. What Tata Martino did, and I can't blame him for it, because when you have that much front-end talent, it's, hey, guys who are really good, go in. Like, I'm going to give you another attacker. I'm not going to play a line of 5. I'm not going to play three center backs. I'm not going to play Noah Allen as a center back. I'm not going to play Noah Allen, period. I'm going to give you another attacker. We're going to go 4-3-3. We're just going to out-talent them. A lot of times you can do that. Atlanta didn't allow that to happen. And Brad Kazan has a series for the ages. Derek Williams was so good in the series all the way around.
I feel like he's a player that isn't talked about a lot in that series in particular. He outstanding. I even think back to his performances in game 1.
Yep.
I mean, outstanding what he was able to do. And on 3 games in 7 days, and he delivered that performance. I think, yeah. And you bring up too, like, the depth of the chart and what you need. I keep think back to in game 3, you got Noah Cobb coming in the last 10 minutes.
Yep, good shot.
Made a absolutely brilliant clearance off the line to keep it 3-2 for Atlanta. And that goes to show that, you have those players who can come on and can make an impact when needed. And that's exactly what Atlanta did. That's exactly what they did. And that's what Miami just couldn't replicate.
Massive credit to Rob Valentino and his staff.
Absolutely.
Because, look, you get 2 game-changing performances from subs right before the 90th minute. In game 2, Sean De Silva. Game 3, Noah Cobb. You have a game-winning goal, and you have a game-saving clearance off the line. It takes everybody. And Atlanta United has used that, and they're probably going to need it again in Orlando, where this is a very talented Orlando City team. You look at their lineup from the last game against Charlotte, and that front end talent: Ramiro Enrique, Ivan Angulo, Martino Heda, Facundo Torres. So good. Good holding midfielder in Cesar Araujo, Wilder Cartagena as well. That's a good duo. Front 6, really good for Orlando. Back 4, some questions. 2 center backs, I think some bigger questions in Janssen and Schlegel. I think Jamal Tiare can take advantage of those 2 for pace. Rafael Santos, Torhalson on the fullback side, Kyle Smith, if he plays. Solid. They can influence the attack. I don't know how they're going to defend. And if Orlando stays in what they have pretty much done, a 4-3-3, it'll be interesting. So then you look at the bench, and we talk about the depth and needing everybody. In that game, they brought on Duncan McGuire and Luis Monreal off the bench. Again, more front-end, great attacking talent. Kyle Smith came off the bench. David Brecalo came off the bench to go into the back. He hasn't been able to lock down a starting job. Nicholas Ladero came in, and he's great to have off the bench. 3 guys who can influence the attack off the bench, but defensively, you've got Felipe Martins. I don't know if he really gives you what you need in that central midfield. So I'll be really curious to see how this game goes. I think Atlanta has more depth and has more ability to change the game from the bench. My bigger question is how they start. I don't know if they start in a 5-3-2, 3-5-2, whichever you want to call it, or if they go back to a 4-3-3, which they did in Orlando on decision day. I don't know.
So many questions. And I mean, I even look back to that last game for Orlando against Charlotte, it was Charlotte coming in, it was scoreless for until the 81st minute when Charlotte was able to put one on the board, and then in sudden death, in the last possible minute that could possibly have had in that match, Orlando's able to pull it back, and no thanks to Torres. He brings it back to make it 1-1. They go to penalties, and Orlando able to come away with it with 4-1, which it was one of those things when going into it, if they went to penalties, I actually would have put all of my bet on Charlotte because of how
Yeah,
well they had performed in that sense. But
but it's
Orlando
the
was able to come
way it
away.
went to penalties.
Absolutely.
It's gut-wrenching when you give up a goal in the last minute to go to penalties, and I know there was some controversy over it. I think they did find the angle that showed the shirt grab. When I first saw it, I didn't think it was a penalty, and then you see the shirt grab, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's a penalty. So I think Charlotte was decimated emotionally by that point, and they weren't going to be able to get it done. I think Charlotte did well to take Orlando as deep as they did.
Yep.
They easily could have gotten past Orlando. I mean, you go to penalties in game 3, of course, but Orlando didn't play as well. And I know I pushed back on you about Atlanta dominating in game 3 against Miami, but I don't think Orlando played as well in terms of just quality against a lesser team in Charlotte as Atlanta played against a better team in Miami. I think Atlanta played better over 3 games than Orlando did over 3
Mm-hmm.
games. None of that matters. And now
Yeah.
it's about the matchup between these two, where Atlanta has won both games this season, and they've historically had success in Orlando. So this is a really interesting matchup. If you just look at 4 versus 9, you think, oh well, no worries, 4 wins. I
Yeah.
don't think it plays out that way. I think we could be there for a while. I think this could be a game that goes into extra time and hopefully
Mm-hmm.
doesn't need penalties, but maybe it does. And it's a very interesting matchup.
This is another one. We go back to obviously the Hudson River Derby. This is another one. I don't believe we have a rival name for this one. No, there was no name
No, there's
created.
still enough people who yell about it being called a rivalry to begin with. It's a rivalry. Nobody in
I
Atlanta likes Orlando. Like it's something. If it's not a rivalry, come up with a different word. I don't
I
care.
mean, gosh, I mean, even when I was in the stands, I would tell my dad, I'd be like, listen, I'm like, I don't care what games my brother gets. I don't care what game you give my mom. I was like, I want Orlando City game. That's the game I want when we go to the Bens. That was it. I mean, because that was just always a fun game. You always knew what you were gonna get. It was just fun. Like the emotion and the energy. And I
Yeah.
think you get it here in the semifinal where end all be all, win, go home, and on the run with both of these teams. I just, who, whoever can handle the emotion in this one. Same thing for the Hudson River Derby.
Yeah.
I think this one might shape out. And honestly, my vote goes to Atlanta with especially what you had to deal with in game 3. You dealt with the emotions really well in that game. You didn't let Brad getting shoved into the goal. You didn't let that overtake you. You didn't then go, okay, well, tit for tat, I'm going to come up and I'm going to just, lay in. Atlanta was level headed and they were able to come away with it. And they were able to find the winning goal from Bartosz Leash. I mean, I think they were
Orlando
able to keep it.
doesn't have Nani anymore,
No,
who
they do
does
not
not
have
handle
Donnie anymore.
moments. They don't have Will Johnson anymore to take a dive and then start screaming. They don't have those kinds of figures anymore, but they do still have to show that they can handle the adversity that a playoff match brings because
Mhm,
that's been their weakness. Orlando's had good teams over the years. Orlando has been a club that I think it's fair to say has underperformed. They don't have any. They have an Open Cup. Sorry, I don't want to be completely disrespectful to the Open Cup. That's a bigger trophy than the Supporter Shield. I know there's a bunch of people who are screaming right now, but I think it's because of the way that the schedule works. Open Cup's bigger deal, so they have that. But Orlando has wanted more, and they've never been able to get there. And I think their mental strength has been a big reason why at various points. And Oscar Pareja has made them better. I think they are a much harder team to beat now. But are they as good? And can they handle a game like this one? I don't know. They have to step up and show it, because if there's ever a year for Orlando, this is it. They're the highest seed left. The Eastern Conference goes through Orlando. If they win, as on paper they should, they're going to host whoever comes out of the New York match. So they should feel like the top dog right now. I don't get that vibe from them. I don't think they're invincible. I don't feel that about Orlando. So they've got to play with that level of expectation. And we've talked about it in Mercedes-Benz Stadium for Atlanta United. At times when the expectation has outweighed the level of performance, I think players feel that and they struggle with that at times. I think we've seen it in the game against Nashville and the game against Montreal for Atlanta. I think that feeling is amplified in Orlando. I've been there in games when Atlanta's played them and Orlando has struggled, and you feel the angst. Like it is something that I don't look. Maybe it doesn't get talked about enough in a game like this, but I do really wonder in this knockout game, if Atlanta scores first, what the feeling is in that building and how that affects the players on the field. I think it could be a very big negative for Atlanta. I think the first goal for Atlanta could be such a big double whammy for Orlando. One, you got to go find an equalizer, and two, you got to fight through the like maze of anger and fury and disappointment in that fan base, because it's one thing to have never gotten as far as they want to get. It's another if Atlanta comes in and beats you in a season like this. So I think that first goal, if Atlanta can go find it, it could be devastating for Orlando.
And you look at the success that Atlanta has had on the road this season in particular too. The way that they have just been able to thrive on everything when they go on an away trip. They're able just to thrive on it. They just come out and they're just not afraid. And I think even to you look at the rich history too of Orlando and Atlanta, historically Atlanta has been very good at Inter and Co as well. I think I would agree with you. I think we always talk about, first person that gets on the board, obviously have a little bit of a better advantage going forward. I would agree with you though. You even feel it. I remember watching a lot of those games on TV. You hear all the Nat noise, you hear all the crowd, and then the second that ball hits the back of the net, it's like silence.
It's a weird silence too.
Yeah,
Like that
yeah.
stadium, look, the fans are right on top of you.
Mhm.
That's a fan base that can be it can be very hostile going in there. And I think it will be for Atlanta on Sunday. But I don't think that has a negative effect on Atlanta. I think if anything, that strengthens them. This team has shown that they really like to be underdogs. They like to be counted out. So they'll be fine with all that. I think if Orlando scores first, obviously it's a harder road for Atlanta, but I don't think it's devastating as we saw against Inter Miami the last two games. I think if Atlanta scores first, it could be devastating for Orlando. I don't know if they have that same mental resolve, and I don't know if they can fight back. I think Atlanta can. Hopefully they don't have to, but I think that they can. I wonder if Orlando can, if they fall behind in a game like this. I really wonder how that goes. I think the first goal, if Atlanta gets it, could decide the match.
It's going to be so fun on Sunday. All of us in the SDH crew are going, minus Sophia. Unfortunately, she will not be there. Makes me sad as well.
Got a good replacement, though.
We got a good replacement. Nick is going to be coming with us this time. It's going to be me, John, and Nick. Obviously, Jason will be there, but Jason will be on the call for the radio. That game, it will start around 3:40 is when the game is slated to start. Mike and Jason will have the call on 92.9 The Game and on the Odyssey app. Five Stripes Countdown will be starting at, I need to do math, 2:30. Oh, that was rough. That was rough. I don't like it.
There's a bonus show, though. That's what's probably throwing you off.
Bonus show. Yes, that is the bonus show.
Tailgate show starting at 1 o'clock. So and there will be a check-in from the tailgate that I think SDH is helping with for the 92.9 show. So you can listen to all of it on 92.9 starting at 1 o'clock, then 2:30 for Five Stripes Countdown, 3:40 for kickoff. You can listen on the Odyssey app as well for all of it. We'll have tons of content before that as well. Maddie and I will be at training tomorrow. We'll have a training ground dispatch. You'll hear from Rob Valentino. You'll hear from Saba Lobjanidze. We will update you on what we see in training. And then Saturday morning, before we even go to Orlando, we will all be involved in calling academy games from the training ground starting at 10 o'clock on Saturday morning. Maddie and I will have the first game at 10, and then John and Jarrett will have the second game at noon.
Now listen, Dawnstar777 says he calls it the Dirty South Derby. I kind of like that.
I've heard that.
I kind of
It
like
hasn't
it.
caught on. I have no problem with it. I do wonder if it will get a name. I look again, like I think it's changed with Charlotte, Miami,
Mhm.
Nashville all coming into the league.
Yeah.
So Orlando gets pulled into rivalry with Miami, and Atlanta gets pulled into rivalries that are drivable with Nashville and Charlotte. I think those are going to take the priorities. This one will just be two teams that really don't stand for one another very well. There's been a lot of bad blood between these two clubs, between the two fan bases. Atlanta's had the better of the success, but look, that better of the success in terms of the matchup between these two, it gets washed away if Orlando ends Atlanta's miracle run on Sunday. They will never let Atlanta fans forget about it, and they shouldn't. That's why we love what we do. It's why we love the game. They can rewrite their history if they get a win. That's going to be a big motivation for them. For Atlanta, look, I just don't think they really care about anybody else other than who's in that locker room. I think this group has really bonded well. I think it's a good mix of guys that are being led by a really good coaching staff who are pushing all of the right buttons with this group right now. And they get another chance to do it. I think the biggest sentiment that I've gotten from people at the training ground and from talking to players and talking to staff, they're really enjoying all this and they don't want it to end. So they want to keep going. They want to have another week of games. They want to have a couple more weeks of games, but they've got to win in this one to keep that moving. So that's a lot of motivation for them. It should be a really, really fascinating game. I'm not using the word fun about it
Oh,
because I'm already stressed about this thing. And it's Thursday night. It is going to be intense. It is going to be
chaos.
maybe. I hope not, but it could. I intense is the word I keep coming back to. I
That's a good
think
one.
you're going to see a lot of tackles flying in. I think you're going to have a lot of flashpoints in this game. I think it's going to be one of those kinds of games. Maybe it'll be fun because of the result at the end. I don't know. It's going to be stressful, I think. So we'll see.
It took the words right out of my mouth. Took it right out of my mouth. But anyways, everyone, that was MLS Six Pack live here on the SDH network. For Jason Longshore, I'm Madison Cruz. We're saying so long to you guys for tonight, but at 9:05 tomorrow, John Nelson is going to have the morning show. Going to talk all of these things as well, especially as we lead closer into the game on Sunday, and a whole bunch more soccer news from all over the world. So make sure y'all stick around. 9:05 a.m. You can find us on social media. We'll be at the training ground tomorrow. So make sure you guys have everything set up on social media. Follow us on Soccer Down Here on Instagram, Blue Sky, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, you name it. We're on it all. So make sure you give us a follow. But guys, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you guys here back tomorrow at 9:05 a.m.